Alrighty, we're gonna get started here. Looks like we got folks showing up, and we'll have some folks being admitted along the way. But I just wanted to welcome everyone to our Careers in Conversation panel series hosted by the Microbiome Center's Consortium Education Working Group. As a brief introduction, my name's Derek Camp. I'm a member of the our early education group, and I'm joined with Kim Ndofu and Katrina DeWitt working on tech. So, MCC is a nationwide network of microbiome centers working together to develop and share tools and resources that accelerate the understanding of microbiomes. And part of that mission includes preparing early career scientists who are pursuing careers in microbiome research. And then that's where these panels come in. With these panel discussions, we are hoping to have space where folks who are more established in their careers can offer insights, knowledge, and encouragement to those of us who are beginning to carve our paths in the microbiome sciences. So today's panel is Finding Your Niche in Microbiome Science. We have three members from a diverse career industries and institutions. They'll be able to introduce themselves here relatively shortly. But we're looking forward to hearing about how their experiences have shaped their careers and how they chose where to go and some of the benefits and thoughts on these institutions in which they are. So, with that, then, I want to hand it off to our panelists to introduce themselves. I know that some folks have a couple slides that want to share. And if you could, for us, share your name, the institution that you're at, your job title, and kind of share a little bit about what you do in your role, highlighting stuff like day-to-day responsibilities, useful skills that you have, or that could bring into the institution here, or some of your personal favorite elements, like what drew you into this position. We can start with Jennie for this.
Ah, all right. Can I ask you to bring up the slide? It'll be a visual aid for me, and then I won't have to mess with my iPad to do it from here. By way of introduction, first of all, I'm really thrilled to be a part of this. I think this is a great opportunity to meet with all of you as well, and learn from each of you as well, and in terms of the questions you ask and your own experiences in your own research centers. So, as Derek said, my name is Jennie Starr. Um, I work with Nestlé Health Science. Nestlé Health Science is a pharma unit within Nestlé, and we have a gut health portfolio. VOWST, which is a microbiome therapy, the first oral microbiome therapy, is a part of that portfolio, and that's really where I spent the last 4 years supporting what was the donor program for that therapy that supports patients with C. difficile. My background is not science. My background is actually, I began my career essentially going straight from college to law school and practicing law. I was a litigator for many years, and then moved into product management, tech at first, and then onto biotech in the last 8 to 10 years. In my work, I actually am responsible for market insights, and market insights includes market research. We look at research associated with current products, but also new development, looking to make sure that if we're heading in a particular direction with the protocol from the scientific team, that it will be well received by the providers, by the insurance companies, as a new treatment for specific indications. I work heavily with our data science teams and with our medical affairs teams. And in essence, you can see here the progression. I've actually worked with tech companies and then on to healthcare and then into the assay world associated with companies working with formulations with bacteria, looking to see whether bacteria survives as it goes through manufacturing, and then on into human health with the microbiome therapy. So over the course of time, essentially, I've also worked with nonprofits. I've worked with women in bio. So for women who are considering these pathways into industry, happy to chat a little bit more about that. And I'm also really excited about the work we're doing at MCC, specifically to look at founding an industry to academic bridge program to ensure that we build best practices to support all of you within the research centers and obtaining the funding you need to propel what you're doing. So looking forward to chatting a little bit more, but I'll end there because we have a lot more to do. Derek, does that suffice for the introduction you were seeking?
That sounds perfect. Thanks so much. Corrie, we can move on to you.
All right. Well, thanks so much for the invitation. And I'm going with the low tech option of just chatting to you. I'm Corrie Whisner. I'm an associate professor of nutrition at Arizona State University. And my career is really centered on one big question: how diet and the gut microbiome and early life development all interact to shape health trajectories across the life course. And I'm particularly interested in studying mothers, infants, and children at the earliest time points possible so that we kind of set everyone up for a positive health trajectory. And I am a nutrition scientist by training. So that was what my undergraduate studies were in, and also my doctoral work. So I did both my undergrad and PhD at Purdue University. And as a first generation college student, I kind of had no idea what the heck I was doing, just sort of bumbling along, walking through doors when they opened, which ended up leading me in the direction to the microbiome. And I learned that there's a gut bone axis. I mean, nowadays there's a gut everything axis, but back in the early 2000s, that was sort of a novel concept. And so I started my work in bone health, and was really interested in calcified tissues. And I've since kind of moved into the obesity realm and general metabolic health. Um, and I, after graduate school, I did a 2-year postdoc at Cornell where I studied adolescent pregnancy, which is a controversial topic, but trying to understand how moms and babies compete for nutrition and optimal growth. And then I got a job at ASU in 2014, and I've been here ever since. Really interested in fiber and all things that feed our microbes in our gut so that they do more work for us. And I think I'll leave it there. Oh no, I'll say one more thing. Um, I guess in my work, I do research, service, and teaching because I am an academic. And one of the things I love most about my job is the opportunity to mentor others and work in collaborative teams. And so I do run 2 training grants that offer a lot of professional development and just thinking of creative ways to change the future landscape of health and gut microbiome science. And so if you have questions about anything related to that or what we do in terms of training, I'd be happy to answer questions about it.
Thanks so much. And then Shayle.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'm gonna share my screen. All right, Derek, let me know if you can't see this. Is it good?
It's good.
Yep.
We have the
Is
we
it?
have the
Awesome.
presenter view.
Ah, let's see. Swap displays. How about that?
Beautiful.
Yes.
Awesome. Great. So excited to be here. This is a great conversation and something that, I was not thinking about all that long ago myself. My name is Shayle Matsuda. I'm a research biologist at Shed Aquarium. So I'm kind of like faculty, but at a public aquarium instead. And just a quick overview of like what that looks like. I didn't, like everybody else, I didn't start out knowing that I was going to study the microbiome. I did my BA at the University of California in Santa Cruz, where I studied sustainable organic farming and women's studies. And I always like to say that because I think women's studies has helped me more in my work in coral reefs and coral conservation than anything else during my undergrad. I did a master's in evolutionary biology at San Francisco State University and the California Academy of Sciences, which is a museum in San Francisco. And that was my first taste into doing research in like the museum aquarium world, which kind of planted the seed for me being where I am now. I moved on to do my PhD at the University of Hawaii in the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology on the island of Honolulu. And I'm a coral like biologist, microbial ecologist by training there. And I applied for a Smith Conservation postdoctoral fellowship right at the end of my PhD. And that was what sort of launched me into the direction that I'm in now. And so I received that, and because of that funding, I was able to do my postdoc based at Shed Aquarium as a conservation practitioner institution. But I was had mentors at the University of Miami, Cal Academy, University of Hawaii, NOAA, et cetera. And that was just a way that I tried to sort of expand my network early and figure out different things that I wanted to do. And then I transitioned from my postdoc at Shed into a like full research scientist position, which is where I'm at now. And my research program is basically like I run the microbial ecology program. Most of my work is in coral reefs. As I said, I'm a coral reef scientist by training, but being based in Chicago, I've also started to study microbes in freshwater urban ecosystems.
Mm.
And being at an aquarium means that I do a lot of my research in the aquarium, but then I also still get the opportunity to go into the field. This is Shed's research boat based in Miami, and so a lot of our work is in the Florida Keys area. But we still do a lot of things around the world as well. So that's, I think, Derek, you mentioned what's one of my favorite parts of my job, and getting to work with amazing people and go to amazing places is high on the list. Um, Part of my job, unlike folks who are at a traditional academic institution, I do teach, but I teach our marine science course at Shed Aquarium. So we are part of this consortium of 15 undergraduate only institutions in Chicago. Those schools don't have marine biology, don't have field courses. They can send their students to us at Shed for a 4 credit field course where they come and we do 6 full Saturdays at Shed Aquarium. And then I take the students for a week out onto our research boat to do hands-on training in the field. And for me, getting to do that education component is something that I absolutely love. But it does look, a little bit different than being in a traditional academic institution. And then the last slide before we'll jump into, yeah, all the questions everyone has is like, this is sort of what it looks like. I do a lot of microbiome work in the exhibits. We work with the aquarium team to study basically like what is driving the microbial ecology in the systems and how we can control the health of the animals. I do a lot of early life stage coral microbiome work, thinking about how we can scale up restoration efforts by working, inoculating early life stage corals with probiotics or healthy, resilient symbiotic algae. And then we do a lot of work also, with our colleagues around the world as well. So, we get a little bit of everything, the same as everybody does. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here and happy to answer all the questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much to our panelists for coming out and donating the time for us today. Really appreciate that. We're going to go into a question time. A lot of these questions here are based off of ones that attendees submitted. And our goal here is to generate discussion with and between our panelists. I'll probably be asking a general question and then prompt a specific panelist, but I'd encourage folks to riff off each other's responses. And if you have them, you can ask your own follow-up questions too. For folks in the audience, then, if there's anything that the panelists bring up that you'd like to learn more about, drop it in the chat and we can do our best to address those either during the conversation or later on when we have a time dedicated for audience questions. So one thing I'm very glad that folks just kind of teed up for me very well is that we have folks who are doing microbiome research, but not a lot of people started doing microbiome research. And there's these paths that folks took there. And I'm wondering for folks here, what about the microbiome was fascinating to you? Like what drew you to this research? If there was methods or certain questions that were being asked along the way. Jennie, I would love to hear from you on this one.
Yeah, I don't know if you can do this, but if you're able while I'm chatting to bring up that second slide, it'll serve as a good visual as well for what I'm about to say. But not being a scientist, right? Of course, I had a lot of curiosity around microbiology. I shouldn't say, of course. I actually that was where my personal curiosity lay, and I actually wanted to share this slide as an example, just to share with you that the first company that I worked for within the field was actually working with companies that produced consumer probiotics, supplements, nutritional aids, and we were testing those companies' products to determine, as I mentioned earlier, whether or not if they were formulating with bacterial spores, for example, or they were formulating with 18 strains, and they were doing different types of encapsulation. They wanted to know was there survivability, and we were using flow cytometry actually to be able to determine if the cell barrier had been deconstructed and essentially caused the death of the or lysed cells. So I was just getting techie enough to understand that there was some interesting science, and I bring this up because if you think about translational research and what happens with the industry, you know, this is sort of the paradigm. You can think about consumer probiotics, cosmetic products, think of all the things that come from the sea that can make a difference, right? In terms of some of those kinds of products. Agricultural products, we were testing agrobiotech products instead of antibiotics in the food stream, right? You know, what could be done with bacteria to change the soil, to change the animal feed, et cetera. And so I wanted to just sort of remind you that, like, I gave examples of some companies in this field, but some of these things are more rapidly approved, right? They have different regulatory constraints. The bottom line, to answer your question, though, was I was working with all these companies that were on sort of these faster paths to bringing something translationally into to people, right, for use, and got super curious though about the things that could make a difference with microbiome. This is pre the first approved FDA approved drug for human health. So because I have a legal background and because I don't have the science background, I got very interested in sort of how do we move microbiome science more rapidly into the field, and what can we do ultimately to see the science behind these kinds of potential solutions, whether they're products for the world to utilize, right? Or they come all the way down the spectrum to human health, to making a difference with disease. So that's the answer to your question. My curiosity kind of rolled from those early stages on into where I'm doing that work today, and I'll just finish with. You can go ahead and take that down if you want to for the next folks, but I'll just finish with saying that the work that I do today is the market insights work, but I'm privileged to continue to do clinical studies with Nestlé Health Science. And so we look at our business unit has a medical nutrition component as well as the pharma component. And we do quite a bit with regard to clinical studies to really understand, for example, how things like dietary interventions can make a difference, and have been working with some partners within MCC as well in doing so. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a nuance in terms of how I landed in the microbiome and why I'm so passionate about it and its potential.
That's really cool. Going from the law aspects and the product management to looking into this. Um, Corrie, were you able to, or when you were doing your school and you said you were kind of just following open doors along the way, what kind of drew you to the door of microbiome research when it came to nutrition? Was it something question-based that you found an open niche for that you could find, or was there something particularly fascinating about it?
It's a good question. One that sometimes I look back and think, I'm not really sure how this happened, but um, I would say it was more failing forward and just constantly getting back up. So I took, as part of the nutrition degree program, a microbiology course, and I loved it. I thought it was so cool. We got to go around and like swab things all over the building and then grow microbes on agar plates, and it's not probably that technical or that interesting of things really, but I thought it was fun. And then, in the nutrition world, we eat a lot of fermented food. So, you start to connect these things. And I'd always had a good relationship with my family dentist growing up. And she was like, you like crafting, so you'd be great at removing plaque from people's teeth. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Let's do this. So originally I thought I wanted to go to dental school, and caries are caused by microbes, and depending on what sugars they ferment in your oral cavity, the plaque structure changes. And so I did an honors undergraduate project as an undergrad and got really interested in microbes and plaque structure, so like the biofilms that microbes make. And we had this whole plan that I was going to transition to a PhD, also apply to dental school. focus on preventative dental care. I did not get into dental school. They don't care about prevention. They care about drilling and billing. So that was an epic failure. And also then my graduate school project was supposed to be, rather than growing, you know, from mock cultures, plaque, to actually get the plaque off of people's own teeth. But you destroy the structure. So we weren't able to like really be able to capture it in a way where we could look at sugar diffusion through the biofilm. And then my original mentor didn't get tenure, so I needed to switch labs. And then I ended up in a bone lab because calcified tissues, that's the connection there, the door that opened. And they were like, well, we have this project that doesn't have a student, and it's to feed dietary fibers and see how they affect bone health. And there was a collaboration with a agronomy scientist actually who was going to look at the gut microbiome. So, soil translating to poop works, I guess, because manure, all that jazz. Um, and then I just really never looked back after that. I was just we were doing Roche 454 sequencing, and I spent so much time in that poor agronomist's office being like, explain this to me. Oh my gosh, how's this work? Teach me this. And yeah, you find a passion and you just keep pulling at the thread, I think, and don't give up.
I'm really excited to learn about the craft to dentist pipeline. Uh, but I'm just hearing the tenacity and stuff that was coming through that just like the passion of seeing something on a plate and then finding a way to just incorporate that through everything else. I can relate with for sure. Shayle, can you speak to some of your experience with how did coral and the desire to be doing some of that work lead to microbiome?
It was an accident. I think that that's pretty common for a lot of us. It was a sort of a part three of one of the first experiments I did on coral heat tolerance in Hawaii, and you know, it this was right during the time when we were starting to, really dive into more coral holobiont work. So all the different, microorganisms that live in corals that affect how they're responding to their environment, and it's relatively still a young field in corals. Like there's been a lot of work done, but at the time, even figuring out like what questions should we be asking as we are working on these interventions was something that was like still pretty new and is still, I would argue, still pretty new over here. So it it was really interesting to me how everything worked together. And then how we could potentially use microbes as a affordable way to potentially scale up some of the restoration efforts that we're thinking about worldwide. And so it kind of just started to like logically make sense and be an interesting direction to follow in.
There's almost a common theme of microbes and the microbiome being a tool of sorts, of something to use and to understand more stuff going on. Um, I guess a question, real brief. This one's going to be for my sake as much as anything else. Do you consider yourselves a microbiologist, or do you consider yourself something else?
I would say I'm a microbial ecologist, so I focus on more the ecology side of things. And it's yeah, so I guess that there's lots of paths to go down here, but I think that to sort of link it back to career choices, being choosing the place that I chose to be sort of allows me to do all of it. So I'm allowed to sort of build on my background, but we have um, folks who are in the Chicago area who are like, working on, the more like bacterial culturing side of things, who have a lot more experience in that side of it. And so like those are the folks that, when I was choosing my institution and thinking about like where I wanted to go professionally, choosing a large city where there were a lot of institutions with folks who do a lot of the work that I wanted to incorporate into my work but didn't necessarily want to be doing myself, was a huge thing that I thought about as I was moving forward. Happy to talk more about that.
Any other panels want to pitch on whether or not they're microbiologists?
I would say I'm not. I call myself a creative nutrition scientist
Ooh.
with a passion for microbiome. Um, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
And as I've already shared with all of you, my mantra as I came in actually to working in the microbiome space is that I'm neither a medical practitioner nor a scientist, and I don't play either on TV. Nonetheless, I was asked by the chief technology officer at Seres Therapeutics at the time to lead the donor recruitment team for the clinical operations part of our company. I was recruited as a marketer and a business development professional into essentially a clinical operations and manufacturing department. So I think you're asking a really great question, right? Which is, how do you envision yourself from a skill set perspective? And I'd almost like turn it on its head and say, like, your natural curiosity and your core competencies, right, likely come into play heavily, right, as you begin to explore the microbiome space.
I'm gonna synthesize some of those things together of like recognizing like our natural tendencies and core things and what Shayle was talking about like looking for an institution that could do a lot of stuff that he was looking for. And we can start with you, Shayle, here. When you were trying to find an institution, you talked about wanting one that had a lot of collaboration involved. And when you're trying to look into that, what was your playbook looking like? How did you get your foot in the door? Did it involve like cold calling people, pitching yourself to certain positions, or any sort of self-funding? So, like, what's the passion that brought you to a certain spot? And then what was the logistics of that whole
Yeah.
process, too?
No, it's a great question. I knew pretty early on that I wanted to run my own research program and that I wanted to be at an aquarium or museum. Having done my master's there, it was the type of research environment that I wanted to be in. I really like having the public floor there and having a living collection. So I love teaching, I love education, but I did not want to be in a traditional classroom. And so that was like there was like some components that I was looking for. As far as the type of program and the type of freedom I would have to sort of follow the research path that I wanted to in that program. And not like, I spent a lot of years in academia and I was ready to not necessarily land there permanently. So this was always my ideal path forward. But I wanted to stay in research. I knew that I wanted to be based in a large city. I'm LGBTQ, and where I was going to live mattered, right? Like, and so there's these jobs are hard. I didn't want to move somewhere knowing that I was going to move again for another job later. And so when I was looking for postdocs, that is really why I went and pursued my own external funding, so I would be able to go where I wanted to go. Shed Aquarium does not have a postdoc program, so I knew if I wanted to be based there, that I would need to have my own funding. And it worked. Like I reached out to a colleague who is also a dear friend of mine. He did his postdoc right in my PhD, and I was like, "Hey, here are some ideas that I have." And in coral reef work, if you are working on manipulating microbes, it's hard to get permits if you're in the area where the organisms are, right? Because there's a huge risk of things escaping. And so being based at a public aquarium in the middle of the country is actually a great place to ask some of these questions where there is no risk of anything. And so there's a lot of reasons for me to be at Shed in that sense. Like I said, we have the research boat in Miami, so I knew I'd still be able to get out and do the type of work I wanted to do and do applied conservation as well. So that's how I ended up getting to be based at Shed. And I also had my eye on Cal Academy. But I knew Cal Academy I like to hire from outside, where Shed tended to keep people from the inside. So right off the bat, I sort of knew the institutions that I wanted to be based at. And as soon as I arrived at Shed, I pretty much let it be known that this is why it was my like career plan. Like I was like, I want to stay here. And I want to run my own research program here. And I got involved across the board in education and outreach with the policy team and just tried to sort of embed myself into the institution and meet as many people as I could. And then I really, this kind of does relate to the last question. I had to sort of rebrand myself because my postdoc mentor was the coral person. Shed has a very small research team, and so there wasn't going to be room for two coral people. And so I really thought about how could my work complement the research goals and conservation goals of the institution, and branded myself as a microbial ecologist, focusing on both marine ecosystems and coral reefs, but then also pitching this new wing of research, which I've just started on freshwater urban ecosystems, because Shed does a lot of conservation on the Chicago River. And I'm like, can we use microbes as indicators of how successful these ecosystems are changing? And so I basically pitched that and repeatedly kind of pitched that over and over again until they basically created a job for me, which is not a typical pathway. But part of that was also my previous teaching experience and me taking over teaching that marine ecology field course. So we kind of like looked for the gaps in the institution, and I figured out how I could fill those gaps and just had to make a very strong case for myself.
Got to find your niche somewhere. Um, Thanks so much. Corrie, you talked about some of the stuff that you had to overcome in your with advisors, not getting tenure and stuff like that. I'm wondering if you could speak to a similar question of how you got to where you were and some of the logistics of it, and if you are willing to speak to folks and like give tips who might be in a similar situation about what you learned from those experiences and how that informs what you're trying to do as a scientist today.
That's a lot to unpack. um, okay, if I deviate from what you were hoping for, let me know, Derek, and I'll circle back. Um, Looking back on all of my experiences, and I definitely just heard this in Shayle's path, is being, you know, involved in a lot of things and showing your passion and commitment, volunteering for events like the community outreach, if you know your institutions have that, those are always highly valuable because people know who you are. So that was critical for when I needed to switch labs, because people, other faculty knew who I was. I helped with a lot of things. And so cool opportunities came along. Like I got to travel to DC and present with one other student work that our whole department worked on from like a national USDA program. And I got to do that because I volunteered at the state fair to do bone density screenings for anyone who came to our tent. So things like that really matter, showing that, you know, you're in it for a variety of reasons and not just yourself. I think, and I see this in academia, there's a lot of I and me. And, you know, the people who I see really excel are the we kind of people who are interdisciplinary and want to bring others into the fold. So remember to be champions for others and volunteer for things. I guess in terms of my path in academia, I'll be the first to tell you that terrified me. I wasn't really sure if that was the right path. The thought of, you know, publish and perish, get money, and maintain it, that's really scary. It still scares me, but it's also really fun and exciting. And the work kind of like carries out itself when you're passionate about what you're doing. During my postdoc, I think it was only like 2 months in, a job opened up where my, at the time, boyfriend, now husband, had already gotten a job at ASU. And so we met at Purdue. And then he encouraged me to do a postdoc to see if I thought academia might be the right path. He's like, well, you know, no stakes in the game, right? Like you can try it out. You can specifically seek out the opportunities to see what it's like to be an academic. So have your mentor, like let her, maybe you can sit in on meetings with her where she talks about budgets and other things and how she handles challenging things that are going on. And anyways, the job opened up at ASU, and that's where my husband already was. And my mentor was like, isn't that where Ross is? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, well, you need to apply. And I said, but I just got here. And she's like, sweetie, that's not how this works. When it's time for you to go, you go. And you have a dual body problem. So you should need to be applying all the time to either try to get your husband to get a, you know, opportunity where you land, or you get a job where he lands. And this rarely happens, this perfectly, where something is opening up that you can apply for. So that was sort of a good rude awakening for me to think differently about the pathway. And I think it's helped me be a nimble mentor to my trainees, like getting to really know do you want to stay in this town? Do you want to go somewhere where it rains all the time? We have a lot of sun in Arizona, so sometimes people do want that, oddly. I still have seasonal affective disorder fear. And I just think all those little things matter. So really know what will make you happy. Um, and then get involved in those things, give wholly of yourself, and that will come back threefold to you.
I love this focus on intention with community, whether it be for yourself, in terms of just finding a nourishment that you need, and like stability and support, but also as simply like a pragmatic way to network and get yourself out there and get these experiences that, by the sounds of it, are often ways that pay off. And have been not only just professional ways to move forward, but also just passion finders along the way. Some of the logistic stuff that folks are talking about, I also really appreciate because we can have all the passion in the world, but if I don't know how to balance a checkbook, then that's going to be a hard time. Um, and Jennie, you were talking about some stuff with funding for moving microbiome science forward. And can you talk a little bit about how that works in your institution or in the industry at large about how that finances can be shared with folks and what the type of stuff is being looked for when you talk about moving stuff forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the holy grail, right? Is understanding some of those pieces. Probably not enough time today to go through all of that in detail, but what I would suggest is one common theme you've heard today from I think Shayle and Corrie already is this theme of building relationships that matter. And so I will lean in on that heavily to emphasize that at the end of the day, whether you're talking about understanding grant processes and knowing project leads and the various different foundations or agencies that support funding in your arena, developing those relationships, not being afraid to pick up the phone and place calls to ask what's important here in this process. What do you need to know or read from us in order to be successful? I think that those hesitations are probably the biggest things that hold people back. I didn't know I could do that. I wasn't aware of what options I had, right? So doing your research, doing your homework, and then building those relationships. The same thing is true if you're looking at potential collaborations with industry. Once again, building those relationships. And it all starts with sort of an alignment. I love that Shayle described that he's still engaged in the work that he's interested in, but he was very cognizant of the ecosystem that he was working within and very aware that he had contributions to make, but that it needed some alignment, right, in terms of the strategies that the institution itself might look to in terms of growth and sustaining itself, and his own ability to impact those areas and to open the door to those things. And so I think when we talk about funding, you always want to remember that what you're really looking for is going the same pathway as those who may be interested in funding. And when you can find those alliances, right, and you build those relationships in a sustainable way, it's not just I met them, it's I've had conversations about their interests, they understand what I can bring to the table, and we are on a consistent path of nurturing that conversation to take it to the Holy Grail, which is that closure of some kind of a collaboration or a grant or otherwise. So those would be my recommendations in terms of how you look at this topic, right? And I do think just from the many years that I've been now working with professionals in the life science space, that this is like a place you just need to build a muscle. It's as equally as important as understanding your instruments and the progression to new instruments as it is to the core competencies related to a solid clinical study and its protocols. You want to develop this muscle because it's really important to the lifeline and also to being able to message and talk about what you do in a way that has pragmatic and productive messages for those who could support the work that you're doing.
Building networks through communication and just like being able to learn what's going on and understanding a need is is a big thing of what I'm hearing here. Um, there was a lot of questions that we had from folks who are looking to find a position about how do you not box yourself in, and some apprehension for that. I know I definitely had that of as soon as I graduated, it would be like I choose my path and I'm stuck into it. There seems to be a lot of dynamics around folks' career paths, though. Did you feel a similar sense? And this is going to be general for the panelists, a sense of feeling like you were choosing something going in, or were there open doors that felt like moving forward? How did you navigate that?
I think it is all over the place now, and what is happening in our fields now is completely different than even when it was 4 years ago when I started my postdoc. Yeah, you're not boxed in because I don't think anybody has the luxury of really being as boxed in as maybe we would have even wanted to be at various points. In coral reef science, it was really helpful for me during my graduate work to see postdocs coming over from like human cancer research into corals, right? Like we're using the same tools, we're asking similar questions. Can we apply them over here? So, especially when you're working in this broad field, like you can do this in a lot of different ways and a lot of to have a lot of different types of impact as well. So I think that and that's something that I also tell folks. It's like you don't have to work if you want to end up in corals, for example, you don't have to be in corals in your PhD. You don't have to be in corals for your postdoc. Like plenty of us get more experience in other systems, and that experience actually makes us more valuable when we come back to work on corals because we're asking questions in different ways. And we've had different conversations with people who are looking at the same challenges, but from a different lens, or in industries who actually have a deeper understanding of microbial ecology than we do in coral reefs, for example. So I think this shifting around happens more now, and I think it is not a bad thing.
Well,
That's encouraging to hear, and definitely hearing the sense of lean into that fact that we're going to be multifaceted, and have that diversity going on. I think at this point, we are approaching. Oh. But we are approaching time where we can open up to the audience here. Folks in the audience, if there's anything in particular that you were intrigued by or wanting to learn more about, we can either drop things into the chat and we can follow up on questions there. And you can drop that into the general chat there, or you can also, if you can, I think there's a raise your hand function, and then we can make sure you're able to speak it as well.
I have a question. Can sort of jump us off. So you all talked a lot about like networking, particularly in your various fields. So I guess my question is right now, as you know, as a graduate student who's not yet looking for jobs, how do you keep those connections sort of warm so that, you know, they remember you? Like how do you go about doing that?
So this is actually a favorite topic of mine. I can get us started if you guys want. My husband likes to tease me that he doesn't know anyone who needs to always meet new people and make new friends. He's very happy with his core group. Um, I I actually believe, and I think I alluded to this earlier, that networking, meeting new people who are doing interesting things is your lifeblood because it exposes you in the same way that reading the news and reading your journals and other ways to opportunities that raise your curiosity and open the door to potentially working together or learning from each other in different ways. So cutting to the chase, my recommendation for any professional, regardless of what stage of your career, is wherever you're living, or based on your particular areas of interest. Identify 2 or 3. I tell my kids this too. I'm like, you should have 3 circles of connections in your life, no less than 3. Um, Find a few consortiums, associations, local networking organizations. Try them out. Go once. And you don't have to speak to everyone there, and you don't have to collect cards. What you're doing is getting a vibe of meeting a few people and learning about what they do, seeing what their programs look like, if they're of interest or not. And you don't go back to the ones that are not of interest, but you do stay consistent. And I mean, like 4 or 5 times a year, going to each of one of these 3 programmatic types of opportunities, and have a meaningful conversation with professionals who are doing work that interests you. From those relationships, you will keep your network fresh. You will have introductions to people who learn about what you do that is interesting to them and they think you should meet. And you will keep your pulse on what's happening in the areas that are of interest to you, so that it keeps that germinating for yourself about where you might want to go next or what you might want to do. And I'll just leave you with that last thought too, that was from the prior question. I've always thought that our careers are really like a tool belt, like that a professional handyman has. Every experience you have, whether it's finishing your postdoc and deciding which direction you're going to go, or getting a degree or a certificate, is essentially just another tool on your toolkit. But it's all of these curiosities and the things that happen in the world and the changes in the way the industry moves that essentially help you kind of find your pathway and continue to grow and continue to develop. So I think you don't want to leave relationships on the table and wait until you need them. You want to cultivate them, nurture them, and consistently build them throughout your life. And then going back to Corrie's point earlier, be generous. Make those introductions when you have them for others too.
Yeah, I love everything that you just said, Jennie. I think that it's also sort of remembering that everybody's a person too, and we all love making these connections, and we love our own networks. It helps keep us afloat during our careers as well. Some things to think about to that you could like actions that you could take to sort of increase those networks or build them is if you are like giving talks at universities is a great way to do that. Like if you're going on a trip somewhere, if you are even in, like, if you live in an area that like has a bunch of universities, like everybody has these like usually undergraduate, seminar series, and they're usually looking for folks. And it's a great way to not only practice giving a talk about your research, but then it's very easy to be like, oh, can you set up some meetings with me with some of the faculty there? And then through those meetings, it's really nice to get to know, to get to have like time to actually just like, it's like shared interests, right? Like more than like at a conference meeting somebody like off the cuff, for example. And then the other piece of advice I'll say is that if you have like your hobbies and your creative side, any of that stuff can also be really great tools for making connections in your field of science. What I did right off the bat, I do sketchnoting, so I like doodle
Mm.
people's talks, and I just started giving them to those people. Like I would like tweet them at them. This is like 10 years ago before everything went downhill. And what it did is it gave me excuse to talk to someone and be like, I really liked your talk before I had any like, deep questions about it. And then I found that like people like remembered me because of it. And so it made it
Mhm.
easier to follow up. But like if you're a podcaster, if you're a musician, if you're an artist, if you do any of these things where you can bring that into science, like people like get really excited about that stuff, and you might be able to use that also as a tool of connection in these spaces.
I think the only thing that I could add that's new here is based on my own experiences. I'm actually pretty shy and have a lot of anxiety, especially in large groups where I'm trying to like insert myself when people are already talking. I'm really uncomfortable and awkward in those situations. So, the one thing that I've always found that works really well for me is looking at, say, a conference schedule ahead of time and seeing who I think I might want to connect with to, make a new friend in my network. And I reach out to them ahead of time and I say, would you like to get coffee or lunch? I'd, love to hear you talk about your work and other things. Or if you just read their paper, you can ask some insightful questions about it. And that has never failed me. most people are actually really excited that someone took the time to reach out and are pretty generous in finding a time that will work. And then it kind of protects me and my own weird insecurities to create a safe space where I can network and connect. And then it's so intimate that it's pretty hard to forget you. And then afterward, I always try to follow up and come back to something that we talked about. And then in the future, if they're going to be at another conference, I'll say, hey, it was so great to connect with you last time. Would you want to get coffee again? I'm sure you have so many updates and you could follow up and show that you remember things from your last talk. And I find that when you remember personal things about people too, those seem to really connect you to people. So like if they told you a story about their family or their dog and you asked to see pictures of them, just not making it all about the work stuff, but them as a person too. I think those things really matter.
Thank you.
I love to hear some introvert representation. Um, Always good to have. We have a quick question about transitioning to government to industry and public health. If there's anything about transitioning to something about marketing and communications. Jennie, this sounds like something right up your alley that you'd be able to
It
speak to.
does. It does. So first of all, let me just say after the call, ping me on LinkedIn. Let's have a follow-on conversation. Just want to emphasize that I feel like my colleagues on the panel will say the same thing, though I'll let you do so. That's what we're here for, is to help continue to support you. But I think you raised a really good question. I don't think it matters. Okay, let me just be frank. It does matter. People will look for opportunity in your resume for experience, of course. But I don't think it necessarily matters that you're coming from one field into another. I think the priority really needs to be on your passion to do that work. And to the extent that you can, to actually craft some opportunities to showcase your work and to do the work, of course, prior, right? So we can brainstorm ideas about basically how within the space that you're in, you can begin to produce from project work some deliverables essentially around marketing communication. And you can also gain really valuable experience of that kind from volunteer roles in the kinds of networking associations and organizations that we talked about earlier, whether it's on your campus or in your agency or in a local volunteer organization. The other thing I want to emphasize when it comes to making a transition from, let's say, a science or a healthcare role into a marketing or a communications role is the variety of technical communications that exist within industry and the imperative to actually have people who can understand the science and then be able to concisely share that messaging in a variety of different formats. And so I've seen a number of people make those kinds of transitions, thinking thoughtfully about the type of technical communications they might begin with, and then moving into some of the business and commercial or branding or corporate communications kinds, or even investor relations kind of communications that might follow from there. So happy to follow up. But generally speaking, I truly believe that you can build the experience from projects and then supplement your resume. And then it's really about you presenting your personal branding as being completely committed to that pathway and seeking it out.
Wow, thanks so much. As we're approaching our end here, I feel like we're learning all this stuff about being able to understand our context in a given space, understand the needs of a certain system, how to have intention about adapting into that specific niche, if you will. But there's something about like microbiomes and microbiology that has some context here somewhere. And how community and commitment to that and communication is all very vital to a big part of this. Um, and I think that's going to bring us then to the end here. Kim, if you want to send up that last slide, it's going to have a couple links for folks that you can follow if you want to give some feedback based on our time here today. If I could get a thumbs up from our panelists, if you're willing to also reach out and have folks contact you and have conversations there, we really appreciate that so much. And there's another link as well for signing up to be a panelist. If you know folks, you can send this link to them who might be really excited to share more information and talk to folks here as well. This will be our final conversation of the semester. We're going to be starting back up in January and February, and we're going to be looking forward to seeing you there. Keep an eye out for any sort of announcements that will be going forward. Thanks again
Awesome.
to all our panelists and for folks coming out.
Thank you.
Great to be
Thanks
here.
for having us.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, y'all.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. It was really a pleasure.
Of course, thank you, everyone.
Nice to meet you all.
Likewise, take care.